We got a great crowd today. Welcome all, and it's our pleasure to welcome to Google Don Knuth. Of course, all you know him as a Turing Award winner, as the inventor of tech, as a recurring character in XKCD, and as the author of The Art of Computer Programming, which I can personally say in my career at Google, that book helped me see more clearly and provided a firm foundation for all the programming I did. And I can say that because it's a very thick book and it's exactly the right size to use as a monitor stand. And so I used it that way for my first 4 years at Google until we got the monitors that are big enough that you didn't need the stand. And of course it has the nice slipcover box, so you can actually use it as a stand and still get access to the volumes and pull them out and read them. Now, of course, not everybody has read The Art of Computer Programming all the way through, and I have to claim that I'm guilty of not having read the whole thing as well. But I have read lots of other works, including one of the books he's going to talk about today, things a computer scientist rarely talks about. And I was really struck by that book and the way that he, first, he does it in a very efficient way. He does stochastic sampling. In looking at just the 316 verses, and it's appropriate that he's here today on 316. He does it in a very thoughtful way that I found very exciting and very useful. And he does it in a humble way and realizes that unlike, say, splay trees, these are questions that don't necessarily have an immediate answer, and they're ones that can fruitfully occupy you for a lifetime. But I think he's more humble than he has to be, because he points out how it's a personal quest for him to try to understand the world, understand its faith better, and how it's useful for him to go about that quest. But he didn't point out how useful it is for all of us to be able to see the way that he addresses it. And now we have a chance today to hear more about that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Peter. Actually, I used to prop up my monitors with PhD theses. And I see a few of my students in the audience here. But okay, so yeah, on Saturday a lot of people celebrated Pi Day, and tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day, but to me, one of the big days at this time is always square root of 10 Day, which is 3/16, March 16th. I'm really happy to be here in the at the epicenter of all of great search engines and search technology, and so the text for my sermon today is from Isaiah 40, verse 28. The Lord's understanding is unsearchable. Really, in a way, search is also a metaphor for life, and so I found another quote that I might as well. Edward Zarin said, I am more a seeker who thinks than a thinker who seeks. I don't know. Anyway, but to me, computer science is wonderful, but it's not everything. And so there's many aspects of life that go together. And although I'm not really competent to talk about anything except computer science, all of us have to deal with these other aspects of our life as well. And I think it's helpful to all of us to share the ways we approached these other issues. Now today, I don't have, I prepared the text of my sermon and everything, but that's about all. Otherwise, I only prepared for today by living 71 years, and and the rest is up to you. So I just want to throw it open for questions, and I have a few answers that I'm hoping, questions I hope somebody might ask, but basically I'm more interested in knowing what you want to discuss, rather than forcing on you what I want to discuss. I guess Erica made it clear that this is not a tech talk. This is an author talk, and I plan to give a tech talk at Google next year. And so if you have questions about tech or any other technical thing, please save them. But today we want to concentrate on interactions between faith and science. With that, I hope somebody has a question.
Yeah?
Go ahead.
All right. Well, first, thank you so much for coming here. I'm probably like the happiest person to see here. Well, it's true because I sent you an invite about 6 months ago, working with the authors at Google. The reason why I sent you this invite is because I want your advice on how can you look cool in front of other engineers by believing in God and also being like a nerd like me.
So that's your question. How can I combine this?
Yeah, how can you like look cool and like,
Cool. Yeah.
and then like
Okay.
like you do, right? Like, and then at the same time, like people don't like look down at you or think you're a religious bigot or something.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
So like, just how do you like get people to like you and still be a religious and a computer scientist?
Okay, so I think Peter mentioned this book, Things that Computer Science rarely talks about. This book is a transcript of lectures that I gave at MIT in 1999, and they asked me to come and give a series of 6 lectures that would talk about this interaction between faith and science. And I thought, well, this is impossible. How can anybody do that? On the other hand, I was intrigued because of what I said, that computer science isn't everything, and so I figured, okay, why not go and sort of treat it as a win-win thing? If the force is with me, I'll be able to speak about it, and people, it'll be good. But on the other hand, and if I ever wanted to do this at any time in my life, what better place to do it than MIT? Well, maybe Google too, but Google didn't exist in the same way in 1999. Okay, so, but one of the things I said in the talk was that I was amazed at how that people in academia, where I spend most of my life, it was sort of respectable to be Jewish but not to be Christian. Now, at any rate, I don't know how to do this. Maybe I was overreacting, but when I said that at MIT, I got a lot of applause. And people said, "Oh yeah, but when the transcript of that lecture was made for the book, the copy editor said, let's take this sentence out. We don't want to, it's too touchy a thing to say something like this." And I said, but everybody in the audience at MIT thought that there was an issue there, that it wasn't cool to be to be doing it, except that people could respect from certain traditions. It was considered reasonable, to be academic and also religious. And so actually, I found later on a nice quote from a man who had been the pastor at Harvard before Peter Gomes went there. His name was George. George Buttrick, he said, one of the things Buttrick said that he said, let's make the doors of a church high enough so that a worshiper need not leave his head on the sidewalk. And that sort of reflects my own background in the Lutheran tradition, because Martin Luther was a person who combined thinking with theology. He didn't treat he didn't say that you have to throw your reasoning powers out the door when you're also considering matters of faith. Now, there's so much to say about this whole business that I'll miss a lot of it. But somehow the central things to me are that there are some things in my life that are mysteries and always will be, and other things that where I can have a mathematical proof and I know that something is correct. And I think it would be bad if everything in my life was something that I was sure about and mathematically provable. And conversely, I think it would be bad if nothing, if I go through my life without having anything provable. But anyway, so I like sometimes to have. I like to celebrate knowing something fully, but I also like to celebrate mystery and know that there's things that are beyond me that they'll never be able to, that I'll really never be able to get, but still that I can do well by continually searching. So that this is the way it works. But I don't have any kind of a black-white saying, oh yeah, this is an axiom, and this has, and this I believe without without thinking and things like this. It goes into the rest of my whole being in some way. Was that the question you asked?
Yeah. Well, like the thing is, like, just the fact that you're here answers my question, because you're cool and you're religious.
But I did sort of feel like coming out of the closet when I started to write this book 316 that a lot of you have, because I was living in Boston one year as a sabbatical year, and there was an ACM conference of something or other, SIG CSE or something, some conference in town, and I dropped in on the reception, and they said, "Oh, what are you doing, Don?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking of writing a book about the Bible, And so I'm thinking, oh my God, they're gonna, but they're gonna say, oh, he's off his rocker. Well, it was nice while it lasted that he could do the art of computer programming. But surprisingly, I got a warm, they said, oh, hey, that's cool. It's just that you didn't talk about it. Yeah. But at these MIT lectures, the people told me that a lot of the undergrads were coming there, and I was supposed to give these lectures and tell them all the answers. And they would say, oh, here's this guy, he's written these great books, and so whatever he thinks about theology must be worth memorizing and stuff like this. And I said, well, this is ridiculous. You don't. A theologian writes a book about computer science. You don't want to necessarily look at the computer science in it. But also, I didn't tell people that I have the answers or anything. That this is the only way to treat religion, or that my way is known to be best or anything. I'm saying no. It's a search. And they didn't want to hear that. They wanted to, they wanted to get to the end. I think the real thing in life is what you're doing while you're searching, and not actually getting the answer. like golf. Some people think the purpose of golf is to get the ball in the hole. But really, the purpose of golf is to have an excuse for being outside in a beautiful, with the lawns and everything, and breathing the fresh air, and so you can have an excuse for walking the fairways and having a great time. It's sort of like what I say about the spiritual parts of our life. It would be a shame if we actually got to the end and then knew all the answers. In a week we would be sort of bored. The whole thing. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Oh wow, Jeff, hi.
Good to see you. So I'm looking for more ideas for adult Sunday school. All right. So I've taken quite a few ideas from 316. So I'm teaching. We're sampling chapters from the Bible. I've taught classes where we translate verses from Greek and from Hebrew. I'm going to do statistically significant words to go pick out, pick out the themes. But my tool chest, I need more things more approaches.
Okay. So how about making haiku out of the Bible? So, in other words, take a roll a dice, find a verse, and then get good dictionary. Oh, okay. I have to tell people. Jeff, when he was a Stanford student, he talked me into spending was it Saturday afternoon or an evening, was it anyway, where we got together a bunch of students and we chose a verse of the Bible at random, and we had a bunch of commentaries and translation and dictionaries there, and we in order to see what other people had said about the verse, and then we tried to translate that verse into English, using some idea of what we meant by English, like English for teenagers, or we could write a hymn or something. We could, but anyway. I found that the best way to understand what you don't know about something is to try to put it in your own words, so Jeff knows that we went through this exercise together. But now I'm thinking that some discipline like haiku might be another way to after you've gotten tired of all the other ways to do it. But the idea of some kind of sampling still sounds good to me. That you don't want somebody else telling you what part of the what part of whatever you're studying to look at, but you have somehow equal access to the whole thing.
Yeah, I'll think about that. I'm still looking for the connectional measure in the Bible. So there are these cross-references that get made by humans. And there are also parallel sections. And I haven't gone and actually figured out, sat down and figured out how to do this on a Sunday school lesson, that you can do this yourself, right? Write this little tiny computer program and it happens automatically. Peter's given me an idea that I'm going to go play with in my spare time. I think it'd be fun to go and try to put a graph structure on top of the Bible.
Okay.
And then do graph algorithms.
Or whatever. I mean, there's also secondary literature and all kind of things about the. But that's the idea is to keep is look for new ways to ask questions. It seems to me. Yeah, you got it. Okay, Jeff.
Thanks.
You're mentioning talking about faith and science at MIT reminds me of something Evelyn Fox Keller says. She's a physicist who became a scholar of science, and she went from Berkeley, teaching at Berkeley, to MIT. And she said at MIT she had trouble getting students to see that there was a social impact on what science has created. And at Berkeley, she had trouble getting them to understand that there was anything but the social construction.
Yeah.
But my question is about evolution. with Darwin's 200th birthday
Yeah.
and so few Americans believing in evolution, and there's still being conflict about what's taught in the public schools. I wanted to ask what you believed and what you think should be taught, what's behind the disagreements.
Yeah, so the best answer to that I know is that the Academy of Sciences put out a book last year, about 50 pages or something in paperback. I don't remember the name of it. That was quite well written, presenting the ideas about, and the issues about this creationism and so on. Now so my answer is, get everybody to read this book, basically. But it's, but I don't know. I've never been in the trenches on this battle that seems to be going on. But the idea of the literal interpretation of Genesis seems to me very hard to defend, because Genesis wasn't written in order to be a scientific document. It was supposed to tell about the relation between God and the world, and not the mechanism of the thing. And science was not. The Bible wasn't supposed to be an oracle about questions like that. So. I don't have anything new on my own to say about that, except what the Academy has done, and but apparently you're right that the issues are getting more and more heated, than instead of going the other way. The trends. If you had Google Trends to chart it, you would probably be as unhappy as the people are. On the other hand, it's very hard for. I mean, I once was having lunch with Josh Lederberg, and I said, and I had to say, Josh, it's hard for me to believe that you just evolved. I mean, there are some aspects of the way we work, like the way DNA gets folded into our cells, that are really different from the things that I've ever seen happening with artificial life and genetic algorithm. So if we ever would, if biologists would ever study some cell and they would find out that the cell was implementing Hensel's lemma for factoring polynomials or something like this, and using this to guide some biological process, I would say that was sort of a smoking gun, that actually there was an intelligent design in the background there. But on the other hand, you got this fact that is, if artificial intelligence can go all the way to make intelligent beings, that's more reason to believe that we might have been created by an intelligent being, because that would be an existence proof that people like us can be can be created. Anyway, this is all speculation, and we'll never be able to prove. Jeff is showing me something here. Science, Evolution, and Creationism, available now, 88 pages. I was a little bit off. Yeah, that's the one.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Frank.
Yeah, hello. My partner, who like you is a Lutheran and an astronomer, once gave a similar talk, and on the question of how did his faith influence his science, kind of had a blank slide of, he has to feel this need to keep faith and science separate. And on the other hand, you've got people like Richard Dawkins, who claim that faith gets in the way of science. How do you personally answer this question? How do you feel your faith influences your science?
Yeah, that's good question. So partly it influences. Okay, so for example, I've grown up with the idea that that God understands my thoughts. You know, so I have a different attitude toward privacy than a lot of people do. I'm just used to this idea, you know, that there's something that my thoughts aren't secret to everybody, and that means that I'm not very good at working in crypto. But I guess that's not really what you were asking. Okay, so I don't know. I haven't met Dawkins, and I haven't read much of his books, but any of his books. But it seems to me that it sounds very dry, and on the other hand, a lot of times when I've read works by prominent atheists or agnostics, especially, for example, Thomas Huxley. He was a generation ago, but he was the one who was debating Darwinism in Oxford. You know, but I find that Thomas Huxley, I find myself agreeing pretty much down the line with what he was saying about what was wrong with the Church of England at the time, and the way people viewed science and religion in the late 19th century. And so, you know, and maybe if I read Dawkins, I would actually find that he has a lot of sensible things to say too, because there are people saying things of more, you know, in my own opinion, good quality, bad quality on all sides of every complex issue. Now, but I certainly can't see why this sense of mystery and wonder would hurt me in science, because in some ways the opposite, the idea that we understand everything because we understand a few things is, you know, this hubris is really counterproductive in the other direction. So that's a short answer to what you said.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So to maybe take that a step farther, instead of just your personal views, what do you think of the notion of if you have a belief that's maybe dictated by your reading of the Bible, just somebody in general, for example, they might feel a certain way about you know, an embryo and whether or not harvesting that is murder or not.
Right.
Taking that to the next level, like how much effort should a person that has that belief put into like getting that belief implemented somehow in policy and in society?
Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah, does a doctor have a right to refuse treatment of something that offends his conscience, etc.? I certainly wouldn't choose an occupation where I was supposed to do something that I felt was morally wrong. I worked for a year in cryptography. Actually, I mean, I worked for a year in code breaking, and I found out that I was not cut out to keep secrets, and I was supposed to be a university professor and tell what I know, but things like this. But at the time I was. I've been faced with things like this. Sometimes, for example, I wrote a paper once where I showed how to break a certain code, and I was asked not to publish the paper because people were using this code, and we were reading the codes, and was supposed to. It was supposed to, you know, promote world peace. The fact that we were reading each other's codes instead, you know. But whatever. But if you're, you know, working on cell, you know, if you're working on embryonic stem cells or something like this, where there are there are some people who think that preserving life at all cost is priceless because of the way of the way that they understand the religion, while others think that if there are many embryos that otherwise will die, it might be better to do this. So there's all kinds of issues that aren't cut and dried, and it can go to but somebody shouldn't go against their core beliefs, it seems to me. I don't see any way to devise an algorithm that's going to decide truth on these questions. But I would say that there are plenty of things you can do in the world where you're not forced to take a particular occupation or something like this. But I would shun. But there are some people whose expertise is being tough. I mean, some people like me, we're supposed to be good at reading and generalizing and things like that. Other people, weren't born to be good at generalizing, but they were born to be really good bodyguards. Okay, well, that's their. I don't say that they're lesser of a person because that happens to be their expertise. My expertise is one thing. But then if somebody's a good bodyguard, is he supposed to also be a thug? Well, that's different. Yeah.
I'm struck by. Excuse me.
He's struck by his cell phone.
That was my ringtone. Excuse me.
Okay, yeah.
I'm struck by your use of the term faith in the title of this talk. I don't know anything about your theology prior to hearing this talk announced and coming here and hearing your remarks. If the talk had been titled, for example, God and Religion or Theology and Religion, then I could...
you mean God and Science?
I'm sorry, God and Science, or Theology and Science. I can see how that would be perhaps where you and Dawkins might have a disagreement on where the preponderance of evidence is and where this could be an invitation to discussion and debate. But the idea of faith is really one that very much puzzles me. It seems to be, first of all, at odds with some of the things I hear you saying here today, which is the searching, the sampling, the investigation. It seems to me like you still are looking to examine evidence and to react to evidence, whereas I take the doctrine of faith to be a proud immunity to evidence.
I see. Yeah, no, that's yeah. I take your point, but actually, I didn't choose the title. I totally agree. And if I was Dawkins, I would also have faith in certain things. I would have faith in science. I would have faith in so for example, what do you believe in if you're a scientist? Like, I think most physicists believe that real numbers are real. And I'm not sure that actually that they are. Because we don't have any, it might be that the universe is finite and there's no way to, there aren't that much in the real universe to be that way. But it's an element of faith that that the universe has certain characteristics, or that some methods are good. But that's not what you're talking. You're talking about a blind faith, or adherence to something, and there are a lot of people who. Okay, so the Lutheran traditional idea is that. We're saved by faith and not works. This was the arguments that Luther had with other people, and so this, there's that use of the thing, and so some people say, oh, that's going to be, the thing, then I have to have more and more faith. So I'm going to try to believe more impossible things before breakfast than anybody else, and then I'll have a better faith. But that's not at all what it is to me. To me, it's the spiritual aspect of my life, and the way I fit the spiritual part in with the rational. Okay. Yeah.
So I just like to respond in particular to this notion that I obviously I don't speak for Dawkins, but the notion that people who don't believe in God still believe in something, in the sense of faith.
Yeah.
I think this was put most clearly by a student of Popper's named William Bartley. Came up with the notion of pancritical rationalism that basically said that rationality is the willingness to hold any particular belief open to question, open to re-examination when presented contrary evidence. Mm-hmm. So we can't hold everything open to question at the same time, because then you can't bootstrap. But within the overall system of things you've come to believe for whatever reason, the willingness to hold any one thing open to question and willingness to change one's mind in the face of evidence to the contrary, I think is the fact that framework can itself question itself says that you can close the loop and not take anything out of the category of being subject to evidence.
Yeah. No, that's well put. In fact, this quote that I gave at the beginning by Edward Zern was taken from an interview with Karl Popper that okay. I don't have a way to pace myself. Is there a way to? Is there a watch or something? Yeah. What? How are we doing?
We still have 20 minutes or so.
Great. Okay.
Hi, Don. We have a question from our Irvine office, from Alistair from our Irvine office. Is the human brain a computer? And if so, what are the theological implications?
Is the human brain a computer? And if so, what are the theological implications? Okay. Well, I think the people there's been a lot of advances in neuroscience since 1999, when I last looked into this when I was at MIT, and I knew the state of the art at that time, and now I know that a lot of people are working on building elaborate models of cortical columns, and also or just trying to develop software based on what we now know about the architecture of parts of the brain. But it still seems to me way far away to know about before anybody's going to get any real understanding of consciousness, what it really is. This is the greatest unsolved scientific question. Maybe someday we'll get a handle on it, but it still seems way far for me. But let's suppose that but anyway, the human brain works very differently from any computer that I know, obviously. But the question is really, is there anything else besides this this deterministic or some that makes the human brain different from a computer? And the arguments given by Roger Penrose and so on seem to convince him, but not very many people who work in AI and things so on. So I consider this as one of the mysteries, but I don't know if when I'm having a feeling of love for somebody, whether that's just some chemicals that are causing this or what. I live my life without wondering about these things, but without ever knowing the answer. And but the implications, to me, the way I look at it is I personally, everything I've experienced is consistent with the idea that that God, or however you want to define it, has been active somehow with me. I have no idea why, but sometimes I definitely feel inspired and so on. But actually, I wish she would be with me right now to answer this question. But I would be unhappy if I ever had a proof of that. This is the area of mystery that I spoke about before, when I. So I like to keep actively keep my antenna tuned to more evidences about what God wants me to do. If as far as I know, I'm going to, I believe that God is there, but I'm not sure exactly what is the best way for me to be in harmony with God's wishes. And so that's my main question: is what can I do that is pleasing to God? And that's what I'm searching for, but not the answer for whether or not the brain is a computer.
Do you think that today's ordinary people need more faith than people centuries ago, and maybe this is the reason for what seems to be that irrationality is taking over again? I explain my question. For me, when I understand something, I know it. I don't need faith. Mm-hmm. I need faith when I don't understand something. Now, it seems that in medieval time, ordinary people knew much more portion of the scientific knowledge at that time. They just went to church, they heard from the priest the word of God, but also some scientific knowledge. God created everything, Earth in the middle of the universe, in the center of the universe, and things like that. But today's scientific knowledge is so wide, ordinary people, well, even scientists know a very small portion of it. So maybe we need more faith.
Yeah. Okay. I mostly, yeah. I got to sort of turn it around, because I suppose that the real question I should be asking is, what do people need, rather than what does God want? As if we want to say, well, faith has these advantages for people, stuff like this. But to me, it comes the other way around. That I don't want to go to church for what it does for me, but because it might be a way that I can do something for somebody else. I don't know. I saw this movie last Saturday night or Friday night at the Stanford Theater. It was a movie from a silent film, 1927, called Seventh Heaven. And then they had also the 1937 version with Jimmy Stewart, and the theology in there was terrible. I mean, it basically says, the main character says, I'm an atheist because I tried religion twice, and I prayed for this and I prayed for that, and I didn't get it, and that was it. So this is the I'm reacting against that attitude toward things as something that's needed, rather than somehow desired by God. I guess I better leave it at that. I do want to mention that I just recently read a novel, came out last year by, Jeff, you can find this one for me. It's called Blasphemy by Douglas goodness. Anyway, it's a very interesting book because it's about a scientist who invents a new religion. And he eventually becomes a martyr to this religion. And the idea of the religion is a blend of science and ethics. So it sort of answers your question, saying for the modern day it would be the sequel to the historical religions, and the scientist devised in a very clever way. Yeah, here it is, Douglas Preston. And anyway, I don't want to give the whole story away, but Preston has this sort of a great line in there. He says, and maybe this was God's wish, that this scientist developed this new religion. Okay, I hope you get the point. Okay. Yeah.
So I got here a little late, so excuse me if you've already talked about this, but I was wondering if you could say a few words about how you come to believe what you believe, both in terms of physical and spiritual matters. Say what your basic preconceptions are about knowledge, maybe experiences that you've had that have led you to believe what you believe, and especially I'm also a little intrigued by the 316 project and this kind of idea of random sampling, especially as I kind of think about creating a worldview and trying to make sure that everything's coherent, and realizing that other Bible verses and all of knowledge have a context to them.
In 25 words or less. Yeah. So the way how I got here was because I was born in a Lutheran family, and my father's career was to be a teacher in the Lutheran schools, and so and it turned out to be a very loving environment where we weren't brought up to hate the Catholics or anything like this, but we didn't know anything about Islam or any other faiths. These things I learned much later in life. So that's how I got to where I was. I just I was born into it. It's clear to me that if I were born in China or wherever you're from, or Japan, there would have been a low probability that I would have ever known much about the Bible, particularly. But still, I don't. And so I'm thinking, to what extent does God want everyone to have the same religion? I'm not sure, but I know things about. Anyway, the thing that I know, that I personally know best is the things that I grew up with, and I keep finding richness there. It doesn't stop me from looking at other things and trying to see how they fit together. But I don't. But I never claim that I have somehow the unique way or something like that. Now the 316 project helped me also. I think people know what this was. That I basically wanted to take a unbiased sample of the Bible, but I wanted also to have. I was doing this with a group of people in our church in Menlo Park, and so we decided we would look at chapter 3, verse 16 out of every book of the Bible, and it turned out to be much more astonishing that the things we learned this way than we would have ever believed. But we chose 316 because John 3:16 is the most famous verse in the Bible by its number. In fact, even I have my book printed in Singapore, and you see on the cover of the book, it just says 316 on it. But when the printer in Singapore comes from a completely different religious background, sends the books to America, on the cover of the book it says John 3:16. So somehow or other this got through. I mean, the people at the football games hold up the signs, you know, now advertising my book. There was this great, you know, 3 years after my book came out, there, in the World Series, when John Crook came up to bat, somebody hold up a sign saying, John, .316, and this was his batting average. So, but okay, so anyway, but it was a sampling method by which I could go through and see not so much just the Bible, but the secondary literature about the Bible. So I could cruise the libraries and look in the indexes, and I would find out what pages, because the theological books are usually indexed by the Bible verse. So I could go through large, wonderful theological libraries, and I could just look at the 1/500th of the books, but you know, get sort of surround a little bit of these things to get knowledge about it, and so we learned a heck of a lot that way, and also I learned about how flaky a lot of the evidence is for its actual text, because over 2,000 years, copying errors creep in, and there's all kinds of different things, and I would find references to corresponding texts that would be in Vedas in India, you know, in Hinduism and so on, and other related materials. But if I could find out what people said about any of these verses, what did St. Patrick say about it? Actually, I don't think St. Patrick did, but St. Bernard did, wrote a commentary, and so so people through the centuries commented on these verses, and I found out that there was a lot of profound thinking about this, and a lot of things to learn that way, and that's why I finally got into writing the book. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that was one of the things I wanted to say anyway.
Yeah, well, I was more wondering about how you synthesize all kinds of knowledge into a coherent worldview.
So I don't think I did that, but it was amazing that it wasn't that different from writing The Art of Computer Programming. I mean, when I'm writing this book, I'm not doing integrals, and you know, I'm not doing certain parts, but the purpose, the abstraction and generalization, trying to find some pattern to the whole thing, or you know, going through the library like this and trying to see how these things fit together was certainly very much like writing about computer algorithms and looking at what different authors had to say about their way of searching, so that kind of work was very similar to something I was familiar with. Hi.
That's a lovely shirt, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I get to wear this every 2 or 3 years now, and so I'm glad. I haven't worn it for a while, but I'm glad to wear it. My wife made this for me. So.
There's an essay you did a while back called "The Errors of Tech," in which you logged every single bug you had while working on tech, and then you went backward and analyzed the patterns. This always struck me as a deep exercise in humility, and I was wondering if you thought it came from your Christian background, or if it was just the right thing to do.
Well, we do have emphasis on guilt sometimes in Christianity, although this is not unique to Christianity. But right now is the season of Lent when people are getting ready for, you know, after Mardi Gras, then people are are focusing on their life as a whole and the ways in which we don't measure up and so on. People go on and go on retreats and so on. So we can think about our errors and so on, admit them and confess, so on. I know Edgar Dijkstra was an atheist, but I caught him on an error once, and he said to me, "Pecca vi." So he knew the Latin for "I have sinned." Now, but I've always felt that really it's not a particular exactly Christian thing, but it certainly fits in totally with the idea that when we realize it, that we don't measure up to our ideals, and my favorite motto is by Pete Hein. I'm not sure what his religious persuasion was, Danish poet, but he said the road to wisdom, well, it's something and easy to express. And again, but less and less and less. Explain it. Yeah. So anyway, this is my motto basically. But learn from making mistakes, and I think I'm glad you brought that up as a good example because people even at Google probably make mistakes. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I always liked problems worthy of attack prove their worth by hitting back.
Okay. That's very good.
Hey, so thank you for coming. So I have a question, and forgive me for providing a few caveats, because I want to assure you that this isn't the sort of facile version of this question. So one of the sort of things that we've come to understand with sort of an understanding of evolutionary biology, and personally for myself, in watching people over my 30-odd years of life, is that it seems like that a lot of human behavior is at least understandable in light of the fact that we have deep structures, whether this is biological or semantic structures within our brain, that cause us to believe and act in certain ways. So some good examples of this, I just made up 3 while I was sitting there, is that kissing a pretty girl, because it seems like that I have structures in my brain that make me want to do that. Another is the sort of moment of enlightenment when you see a really beautiful proof or have a very sort of remarkable result. Like I was just thinking of the Cauchy integral theorem, right? You see a result like that, and I remember the first time I saw it, and I thought, wow, there's just no way that could really be true, and you see it, and there's a moment of sort of connectedness, right, where you see all these pieces coming together, and certainly something within my own brain makes me want to seek out events like that. I'm not sure what that says about me, but or listening to a cantata by Bach, right, and that's very clearly a result of a man who was deeply religious and used it to produce something I think that's exquisitely beautiful. So in each of these cases, though they're good examples of the fact that there's stuff in our heads that make us believe things, it sure seems like that religion is that way. And the reason why this question isn't facile is that I don't think it's necessarily bad that we have this structure in our head that makes us tend to believe things, because good can come out of it, right? But at the same time, I have sort of another deep structure in my brain that makes me sort of seek out intellectual rigor, right? And one of these things is, and maybe it's the case that you don't believe that there are deep structures in our head that make us believe things, or at least tend to make us believe things, but I suspect that you've encountered this as well, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you reconcile your faith with the idea that, it seems like, and you've admitted it yourself, right? You believe that you're a Lutheran because you were raised a Lutheran, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, I couldn't reconcile that with a life as a scientist or a mathematician or a computer scientist, because the sort of maybe you believe that there should be 2 different types of methodologies, and I think that's probably a reasonable answer too. But I'm just sort of wondering what your take on all this is.
Yeah, look, it's not simple, but I don't. I'm saying there's no way to know whether or not this is intelligent design, that we have been wired this way. I mean, I also think that we're designed to be depressed a certain amount of the time. We have moments of beauty, but we also have times when our body is telling us, now you're supposed to think of some reason why you're unhappy. and sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's harder. But everybody. But I mean, I have this motto: 0.8 is enough. Instead of saying 100% happiness is the goal, somehow good design would say it's good for people to be unhappy 20% of the time, because then they'll strive harder instead of always being in an ecstatic state.
You should be writing OKRs.
What?
A company exercise we have. We have a company exercise where we grade things on a scale of 0 to 1. And we have
I see. Well,
so
0.8 is enough. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, so anyway, so it all fits in, though. How in my mind, it fits in with the idea that God has some system that has a lot of beautiful things in it, and so on, and works together in certain ways, and it somehow I want to fulfill the wishes of somehow, but I can't know why this. I can't know whether this was what reality is, because it's way beyond my grasp, and that doesn't bother me. Now, but the connection with aesthetics and theology is very strong. I mentioned that at the beginning, the lecture I gave about aesthetics at MIT, what was I going to say? I also grooved with Cauchy integral theorem. I mean, I made my daughter take complex analysis at Brown, just even though she wasn't a science major. I mean, because she had to know that theorem. Yeah.
So, just really laser sharp question then.
Yeah.
So is religion an aesthetic choice for
No,
you then?
what I don't. To me, it's not a choice. You see, it's something that I feel. I mean, I don't do it for what it does for me. It's something that I feel like I was meant to do. I can't prove it, but that's the way I look at it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. I'm surprised that you mentioned mystery and wonder as a reason for religion, and as a previous person asking the question listed so many places in the secular world that have both mystery and wonder.
Yeah.
But my real question is, if God asked you to do something dire, would you do it? And I don't mean this personally. I really want to know what your views are.
If God asked me to do something
dire,
something dire, yeah, I can't conceive that happening, so I wouldn't do it. You know. But this is a logical. But there is the story of Abraham being asked to kill his son, and he decided to do it, and that was considered his faith by St. Paul has a long discussion of this, and there's been all kind of people meditating about that for years. I probably don't have that much faith as he did to do something like that. Yeah.
I wanted to ask a few more questions, but first, mistakes is what we do here for living, actually.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah.
And how your occupation of a mathematician shapes your faith? For example, a few questions like, what should be the threshold for probability of an event for us to consider it a miracle? Or what is the place of Gödel's theorem in our systems of belief, which opens the way?
This is a good example. I know I know about this disconnect between mathematics and the real world, so I don't trust in mathematics very much because I know that. I mean, I gave a talk once in Romania called "The Dangers of Computer Science Theory," And basically, I just gave a dozen examples of where, when mathematics entered the picture, all of a sudden computer science went backward because people didn't understand the limitations of what the mathematics was showing. So the mathematics was correct, but then somebody thought that therefore I should do this, and they didn't they only understood the statement of the theorem, but not the limitations very carefully. And this is, there were many examples of this. I mean, one was that the very first person to prove that a certain sorting algorithm was optimum. This was a thesis that came out at Stanford before I came to Stanford. But anyway, it was the first theoretical result about sorting was that bubble sort is the optimum way to sort. Well, bubble sort is the only method of sorting that I think is never the one of choice, except for this peculiar machine. I mean, people discovered a mathematical theorem about a certain random number generator would have correlation 0 over the entire period. And so everybody started using this random number generator. They didn't realize that the correlation was +1 over half the period and -1 over the other half of the period. So it was a terrible random number. Okay, so Howard, as a mathematician, I know not to trust mathematics when I'm actually making a decision that's important to my life. But I still advise my daughter to take mathematics in college. It's beautiful.
How about Gödel's theorem?
Gödel's theorem, I think, yeah, that's very interesting because people think Gödel's theorem is relevant to philosophy. I think he would be surprised at that. I mean, I know the proof of Gödel's theorem. I just don't, I mean, that's just one example of showing that we can't know everything, but that seems to me obvious. I don't know. I'm being too cute about that, but there have been some good. I can't remember who wrote about it, but saying the preposterous pseudo-relevance of Gödel's theorem. There's been some good essays about that I've seen sometime during the past year, but I can't remember the context. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the questions.
Okay, I think we're out of time, but thank you, Don, for coming to the...
Oh, okay.